This one I am hoping to learn a lot from because it is titled Fabled Land, Troubled Land, The Crisis Over Kashmir. So hopefully we get to learn a little bit about the political situation of India, Kashmir, maybe Jammu even if we're lucky, and why this area on a map is always dashed or shown to be in dispute. I think hopefully this will give us a good overview of the Kashmir dispute, at least. This was published in 1965 by the Hearst Metrotone News, which I've never heard of before, but that should be good. This should be an interesting look into the crisis over Kashmir. And this should be interesting because I feel like this crisis was a lot closer to this period of time than it is to us now. Obviously it is, but this is going to give us a much more, I guess, of the time look on the Kashmir problem. Let's just jump right into it. Let's see what the fabled land, the troubled land, the crisis over Kashmir is all about. And if there's any Indian people watching and they disagree with this, please let me know about it in the comments. Okay, this is interesting. Screen News Digest. So this is a news report, a very old news report. This looks like it's from something older than the 60s, though. It's black and white. This rings older than the 60s to me.
For a better understanding of the world around you. For a greater knowledge of the world you live in.
Is this just like an ad?
Wolf and Dessauer in downtown Fort Wayne.
Damn, that is so funny. Before we even get to start, Wolf and Bessauer in downtown, what? Where is it?
Or in downtown Fort Wayne and downtown Huntington.
Downtown Fort Wayne and downtown Huntington. I don't even know, is Fort Wayne in Texas?
Brings the Screen News Digest, a chapter of living history, into your classroom.
So the sponsor of this program is this one shopping mall in Fort Wayne, wherever that is. Am I getting that right? Wolf and Dessauer Shopping Mall is the sponsor of this program.
A chapter of living history into your classroom.
But look at this amazing place. Like, again, this is, I guess we're going to take its word. I guess we're going to say this is the 60s. I think this is earlier than the 60s, but just even look at it, though. Look at all these houses on the water. It's so amazing to see. I guess it's India or Pakistan, depending on who you ask, but it's just so amazing to see images of this part of the world at this time. You know, it just blows my mind every time. And for anyone who doesn't know, Kashmir is like the part of India that is in the Himalayas, or the part of Pakistan also that's in the Himalayas. So it's very mountainous. It's very different than like the rest of India. And you can see that in this opening wide shot. We can see this like stupa temple sort of thing. And then in the background, these huge mountains. These are the Himalayas. It's just a very interesting area. I personally don't know all that much about the Kashmir situation. I know that it goes back to the colonial era. I know it goes back to the princes, the Rajas. All I know is that like it's a complex situation that has its origins in the colonial period, in the British colonial period. Dang, look at these 5 kids just boating around on their own too, like as if they're perfectly safe in this society. I know these shots aren't really informing us on much, but they are really establishing like what time this came from. Like, look at this. Like, you don't see shots of like street markets like this anymore. Like, this is an authentic 60s Kashmir street market, I guess. Again, I think this is more like 50s, maybe even 40s, but it says 60s, so we're going to go with it.
A storybook land, immortalized in legend and lore by Rudyard Kipling, steeped in ancient ways and thrust into modern time.
That's the main source of conflict, I guess, in this region, is the Hindu versus the Muslim people, right? Like, you just saw these women in their hijabs or their burqas or whatever, in their very, very clearly Islamic garbs, and then you'll see these people next. This shirtless guy is like the poster child of Hinduism, I feel like. So I think we're already establishing like the source of conflict just in these early shots, in these establishing shots.
And thrust into modern time. An abundant land, a productive land, picturesque and diverse, tense and troubled Kashmir.
Tense and troubled Kashmir. That's interesting that they were calling it that even in this time. Dang, that's a great shot though. Like, oh man, like it does look like an amazing country. Not country. It looks like an amazing countryside, I guess. Dang, that I was not expecting this title card, but here we have it. Fabled Land. What a weird way to show your title, to have the cards like just pop up and off. This is again a funny quirk of the old editing style. An examination of the roots and history of Crisis over Kashmir. So that was a very extended title. I don't think that's the title that's going to be for the YouTube video. It might just be Crisis over Kashmir, but 2 minutes into a 12-minute video, we're at the title. So hopefully now we just jump right into it.
1609. Ships of the British East India Company opened.
Yeah, that's what I said, the British. You know, I don't know how early it started really, but it definitely originated with the British arriving.
Went up trade with India, offering at first wealth in exchange for goods. Later it becomes ruled by force, a dark chapter of blood and plunder. When the Indians fight back, the British call it mutiny. The Indians call it a war for independence.
Yeah, I guess this is also an aspect of history that I have just been completely left out of with in American education per se, you know, and I don't think anyone outside of India really learns about this, but it is amazing to think of the logistics it would have taken to have accomplished this from the British perspective is amazing. It is wild that the British rolled through to India, the second most populated place in the world, and just had their way, you know. I feel like I don't understand it well enough because it is just too complex to actually ever understand. Maybe not, maybe we'll understand it by the end of this video, but I'm just, the whole history of interaction between the British and Indians is just fascinating to me.
In 1858, the British government takes power from the East India Company.
In 1858, the British government took power from the British East India Company, which I think is funny. It goes to show how powerful those trading companies were back in the day, that the government had to step in and actually and supplant the company in ruling the country.
And viceroys rule in the name of the distant but all-powerful crown.
Again, yeah, it's just hard to imagine Europeans and British people specifically rolling through and just having control over everything. There's, you know, I know they gave a lot of their power to the princes or everything, but even still, it's insane that they just had this bureaucracy, this top-down bureaucracy to start with.
Amid fantastic pomp and splendor in 1911, King George and Queen Mary come to India.
Dang, is this real footage from 1911 of King George and Queen Mary in India?
To see and to be seen by their hundreds of millions of subjects.
Is it real? Is this real footage or is this a reenactment? That always gets me. I always feel like I look so dumb for believing that it's real, but this looks real.
England's might and majesty seem secure. But the Shah,
that's an unfortunate picture.
Son of an obscure Indian official, will one day humble
the son of an obscure Indian official. That is funny too. That is, I guess that I'm assuming this is Gandhi.
That empire and set his people free. His name, Mohandas Gandhi.
It's so funny to see him with hair too, you know. I picture him in his final form, but it's funny to see him as a kid with hair. And a mustache.
Shunning traditional family occupations, ignoring parental objections, he goes...
Dude, he looks pretty, freaking snazzy, though. I'll say that.
...to London to study law. As a young attorney, Gandhi settles in South Africa and takes up the cause of...
Dang, so is this just going to be, a biography on Gandhi now, or are we going to go back to Kashmir eventually?
...equal rights, founding his concept of non-violent action. In the Boer...
I really hope I have a program specifically on Gandhi in my library that I can watch eventually, because I am curious about him. I know enough about Gandhi, and I think he was in South Africa for a while. I think he had a very interesting life. He was educated by the English, so He's definitely a very interesting character in history, especially in Indian history. And I don't know, I think I got to watch something on him specifically one day.
War, he serves as the leader of a volunteer Indian ambulance corps. Then, accompanied by the wife he had married at 13, Gandhi returns to India.
Dang, he married his wife at 13? That's nuts. I can only imagine how old she was too, but like, I guess that's just a cultural difference. It's just, that seems so bizarre to me.
He has given up Western...
I don't think any 13-year-old boy is deserving of a girl. That's the thing. It's like, dang, I'm so glad my girlfriend didn't see me when I was 13. You know, like that seems cruel to make your wife know who you were as a 13-year-old boy, you know?
Dress, renounced all worldly goods. And he finds that his fame has preceded him. Indians expect a lion, a giant of a man. But they come to worship the tiny figure who dares to challenge an empire. And they believe him when he says...
Yeah, see, that's the thing, too, is I still just don't understand how Gandhi even rose to be in such a position of significance. I need a full documentary on Gandhi to understand him. Because to me, it's just like, how does anyone get ahead of anyone else in this country? Like, how did he get a voice above all these other people?
Inner freedom will lead to outer freedom. His campaign of non-cooperation becomes a campaign against foreign-made cloth. He urges all Indians to weave, and the spinning wheel becomes a symbol of non-violence.
You know what? I didn't ever really know that. I mean, I knew the wheel was always important to Indians. I thought that was like more the wheel of Dharma or whatever, but that's what's on their flag is the spinning wheel. So that's interesting to think that like them becoming more independent was always associated with the spinning wheel. It's just, that's a funny like symbol of freedom that I don't think anyone outside of India would necessarily understand. But you know, I didn't understand that either until I just watched this.
In 1931, Gandhi begins his most daring experiment, a 200-mile walk to the sea.
Again, I thought this was supposed to be about Kashmir, but I guess we're just learning about Gandhi.
It seems that all India is with him. After 24 days, with world attention focused...
This would have been crazy, to be honest. Like, I'm trying to think of it, but like, I don't know if this would have affected anyone outside of India, but this would have been like the most crazy thing to witness inside of India
on
at the
him,
time.
He will dip his hands into the sea.
This is like, yeah, like the OG Forrest Gump right here.
And pick up some salt left by the waves. Thus, he breaks the British law, which makes it a crime to possess salt not bought from the British salt monopoly.
Well, see, that's insane too. I didn't know that. I mean, I should have been able to anticipate that the British would have enacted something like so dumb as to that. But like the fact that obtaining salt from the ocean was seen as like an illegal act because of like how deep their monopoly on salt went is just, again, another wild little detail that I feel like has been forgotten in this day and age, but just helps you understand their mentality a lot more. Like they weren't even allowed to harvest their own salt. That really does explain a lot of their feelings toward the British rule. You know, and not that they even needed to have explanation for why they didn't want to be ruled by the British. It's just, it's these specific examples that I just don't know that is a lot of fun to learn.
Then every villager on India's long coast wades into the sea to collect salt. Salt, says Gandhi, is as essential as air and water, and the salt of the earth and sea rightfully belong to India's people.
Yeah, I mean, like, how are you even going to try to ban people having their own salt? What's so bizarre about the British Empire is just like how far-reaching and how powerful they were, like where they could enact stuff like that and have people be affected. I don't know. I feel like no random villager in India would care about what a British official had to say until they were outnumbered, I guess.
The battle for independence cannot now be stopped as Mohandas Gandhi walks off serenely to jail.
Thing, he had to go to jail just for taking water out of the ocean. See, like, I'm starting to pick up on like why Indians really were not having fun being colonized.
Thousands of Gandhi's disciples are imprisoned with him. Nonviolence, says Gandhi, requires more bravery than violence.
See, that is actually like pretty pertinent. Like to have all these people together scared and worried, and to still have them not be violent is an accomplishment. It is impressive to see their will to prove their point more so than it is to seek revenge. What is this flag I keep seeing though? Is this like the old Indian flag? Light on the top, dark on the bottom, and there's a symbol on it. I've never seen that flag. I don't know what it is. I'm curious.
And violence. Pandit Nehru, Gandhi's chief disciple, is among those arrested by the British. In the next 15 years, as India struggles toward independence, Gandhi...
See, but who was arresting him? Was that the Colonial office? Because, I don't know, the soldiers didn't look colonial to me.
...undertakes a series of fasts to protest against continued foreign rule. To his followers, he has become the Mahatma, the great soul.
Yeah, see, this is... I feel like when he started to become more of like a religious figure, when he started like starving himself. Again, like, it's amazing that one man going on a hunger strike really had an effect over an entire nation like this. I guess that's, I keep saying it, but like the story of Gandhi really is a wild one. Again, are we even going to be learning about Kashmir? We're like 6 minutes in, we're like almost halfway, and I still don't even know what Kashmir has to do with any of this. I mean, obviously it's India, but like specifically.
Pandit Nehru emerges as the political leader of the freedom movement. But Mahatma Gandhi is and remains until his death the spiritual head. Finally, in 1947, independence nears for India.
Dang, it's so funny also seeing like the old British architecture in India. It just like doesn't jive, like this like old Victorian, like amazing. This is an amazing mansion, by the way. It's just so out of place in India, I feel like. I guess it's the clash of aesthetics, it's the British imperial aesthetic versus like the Indian, nature aesthetic. I don't know. It's funny, and it feels so out of place seeing a building like this in India.
Finally, in 1947, independence nears for India. But for Pandit Nehru, there is a price. He agrees to the partition of colonial India into two separate religious states.
See, that's interesting. Now I think we're finally getting to it. So not Gandhi, but his primary disciple was the more political string puller, I guess. And it was his agreement to split India into two. That seems like a very big decision to make.
Pakistan, with 100 million Muslims, is created as a counterpart.
Dude, I love how he said Muslims, because that's how they used to write it. They used to write it with an M-O instead of an M-U, so they would say Muslims. That's such an old, antiquated way of saying it. It's just so funny. And if you don't know, you won't pick up on it, because I've had to read Muslims instead of Muslims in old texts, like I can hear the way that he's reading it.
India, with 300 million Hindus.
Wait a second, that's nuts. So there was 100 million Muslims and 300 million Hindus at this time. What is this? I think it's before 1965, but let's just say 1965. There's 100 million Muslims and 300 million Hindus. I wonder if the math still works out. There's like 200 million people in Pakistan. I guess there's Bangladesh too. That's what I'm not accounting for. I don't know. The numbers don't seem right. It seems like there are now far more Hindu people than there are Muslim people. Maybe that's just me. Obviously, I don't know how things are on the ground in India, but just based on those numbers, it feels like, I don't know, it feels like there's more Hindus proportionally than there are Muslims now. I never knew that was like the proportion of it. I never knew that there was 1/4 Muslims and 3/4 Hindus.
Gandhi calls the partition a disaster.
Gandhi calls the partition a disaster. I'm trying to think of why. I mean, he probably wanted it all to be united. I don't know. It's tough. It's tough to imagine a fully united India with two major religions in it. I get that Gandhi was supposed to be the one who had faith in peace and, coming together in unity and everything. So it makes sense for him to disagree with it. But from a functional standpoint, I might stand by his guy, his advisor or his politician, because I think they did spare themselves a lot of headache by just doing that straight away. I don't know if this is like fine to say, but I find it so funny seeing like, I don't know, this guy's in turbans, but also like a business suit, you know, right all the way at the end. He's wearing like a Sikh turban, but a full like Western business suit. You know, it's traditional, but it's also like business. There's a clash of cultures taking place within this man's wardrobe even. Once you learn fashion and you learn fashion history, you start to pick up on these things like, oh, he is, you know, he's part of the colonial enterprise, even though he's, you know, wearing a turban or whatever. Like, it's a very curious story behind the man who's wearing a turban, but a business suit as well. I wonder what his position in all of this was.
But the decision has...
Dang, look at these women in their freaking hijabs, though. Like, these are some serious coverage hijabs. Like, this woman doesn't even have eye holes. She has little slits to look through. And this woman looks like a ghost back here. Because, yeah, literally like holes cut into a bedsheet.
Been made, and partition is now only a matter of details. Certain border provinces vote to determine their future status.
But okay, now I'm starting to figure out why we're talking about Kashmir. So we're talking about the division of Muslims and Hindus in the immediately post-colonial India. Let's go. Let's learn more.
Muslims and Hindus, bitter in their hatred of each other, are now...
That's a really funny line. Muslims and Hindus, bitter in their hatred for each other, because I feel like I shouldn't stoke the flames, but I feel like that is equally true today as it is back then.
now free to turn hatred into violence.
That's an interesting observation. They're now free to turn their hatred into violence against each other. I guess that's funny. It's funny that they're positioning like British colonial rule in India as the thing that prevented Indians from fighting with themselves. They weren't so concerned with Hindus or Muslims so long as there were British colonial officers. But now that the British are going, it seems like they think at least that like everything's going to crumble without them. And I don't think that was the case. But let's see what else they got.
August 15th, 1947, Independence Day for India and Pakistan. But Gandhi is not present. Why the celebration, he asks. I see only rivers of blood.
See, what a downer. I would be so hyped on this day to be celebrating. Like, they got their independence from England and Pakistan. I just feel like I would have been in the boat that, like, that's the best day ever for them.
Already the province of Kashmir is in dispute. Pakistan...
Dang, already Kashmir was in dispute, like, day one.
The shaded area, and India...
Dang, I like these little dashed line borders, though. We really get to see it.
Lay claim to the territory, which is roughly...
Okay, so what's so funny about this is like Pakistan today, even if you take out the disputed territories, Pakistan has a little bit more territory on the north than what is shown now. These aren't perfect maps anyway.
The size of Idaho.
The size of Idaho. I like that they gave us that. Again, another classic Americanism of like, I need to know how big this is, but tell me in American units, please. Like, Kashmir is 1 metric Idaho. Thank you. Okay, now I understand. Dang, look at this map, though. I just want to take a second for this map. Look at Tibet. Rip Tibet, right? And then we have East Pakistan and West Pakistan. That's crazy. And then we have Bombay and Calcutta, too. Just old names, man.
India insists that Kashmir has been and must be an integral part of the Indian nation. Pandit Nehru speaks more personally. Kashmir is my ancestral home, he says. It is a piece of my...
Is that true? Is that like the guy, the founding father of India besides Gandhi? Was he from like Kashmir? I feel like he would have taken special care for it if he was. I don't know, maybe not.
My heart. Muhammad Ali...
It's so weird that they were able to agree on like everything else but Kashmir and Jammu.
Jinnah, Pakistan's leader, points out that 80% of Kashmir's population is Muslim.
You know, that's a pretty good argument. I think if it's majority Muslim, probably should have gone to Pakistan. I think the decision came down to like the Prince of Kashmir, and he wanted to stick with India, even though his people wanted to be in Pakistan. I think that's what happened, though. So let's just keep watching.
When the British begin their departure, an era ends and an era begins.
Dang, yeah, that is kind of crazy to think that like one day the British did just leave. I mean, maybe not. I mean, I bet they did still have like their own business interests and everything still established in the country, but there probably was a different feeling after that day. There probably was like, oh, Indians are in charge now, sort of thing. I don't know. Like it must have felt so strange and so good for the British to leave, but also to realize that there was no common enemy anymore.
Prejudices and passions explode, neighbor against neighbor, Hindu against Muslim.
See, this is the part of the story that I don't think I ever really learned, is like how they actually acted out against each other. It's hard because you don't really learn of like the Kashmir War or anything, right? There was just like conflicts that happened, but it's hard to know the full extent of that without seeing it.
In an unholy war that takes more than 500,000 lives,
Jeez, see, that's a huge war. Like, again, like, I just said it's not a war, but, like, was there an actual war? Like, I haven't seen any soldiers or anything. Was it terrorism? I think that is kind of what this is referring to.
Kashmir becomes a symbol of the anguish and agony of independence. When the United Nations Security Council meets in Paris...
Dude, is this the UN Security Council in Paris? Why have I never seen this huge building before? This is, like, huge.
When the United Nations Security Council meets in Paris in 1948.
I'm not going to do this, but for anyone who wants, there are probably a whole ton of fun and interesting flags on this wall that you should have a fun time looking at.
India and Pakistan accuse each other of aggression in Kashmir. After months of hearings and debate, the Council succeeds in drawing a ceasefire line that gives 1/3 of Kashmir to Pakistan and 2/3 to India.
I'm curious if that line is still in any way, shape, or form still like supported. Or actually, maybe that is what I was referring to earlier when I said Pakistan had changed already. Maybe, we'll see. Let's go.
It also orders a plebiscite to determine the wishes of the people in the territory. Pakistan agrees, India does not.
Dang. Didn't India get 2/3 of Kashmir? Like, why are they disagreeing? I guess they probably didn't want to agree to a plebiscite or a vote because they probably knew that because Kashmir was majority Muslim, they would probably have voted to go with Pakistan. That's probably why they didn't want to.
And fighting continues. In 16 years, 20,000 people die in battles along the ceasefire line.
16 years, 20,000 people die. That's not that bad. I mean, I obviously don't want to diminish the lives lost or anything, but like 16 years, 20,000, that's like 1,000 people a year. So these must have been more like terrorist events. Like, this doesn't seem like battles are taking place.
Then in 1965, something new happens. Armed guerrillas begin a campaign of attacks on India.
Okay, so yeah, that's what I was saying. Like before, it didn't seem like organized or specified, but now it seems like, yeah, we actually have some rebel groups forming.
Indian posts deep inside Kashmir.
Again, this is also just like not really something you associate with India, right? Like guerrilla, like combat, you maybe think like Vietnam, maybe Afghanistan, but it's strange to think that like India was dealing with these problems of terrorism even back then too. Like I guess they've probably been dealing with it for a very long time at this point, but you don't really realize the global nature of all of these issues that you learn about when you first learn about them. But then you come back and you realize, oh, like the Indians have been having this struggle with Kashmir for 100 years now.
The men, after being captured, are identified as Pakistanis by a United Nations truce team. They apparently have been trained, armed, and sent by the Pakistan government. Dazed, helpless, bewildered, the victims of the new aggression can only weep. India responds to the guerrilla attacks by sending troops across the ceasefire line to seize 3 Pakistani outposts.
See, this is interesting. So these are the actual like military operations that took place. This is when all the blocks are falling into place now. I just want to read these newspapers real quick. So first newspaper, the Indian Express. Indian troops march into Pakistan, onward thrust towards Lahore. Lahore or whatever. I don't know how to say that. New Delhi. It's so funny to see this in English. Like I understand India having their own newspaper by this time, but like their own English language newspaper is like that's the impressive part. Like they're writing the news not even in anyone's native language. All right, this one, the Hindustan Times, evening news. Our army marches into Lahore area. Indians cross border into Lahore region.
Prime Minister Lal Bahadur Shastri tells his countrymen that the action has been taken to end once and for all infiltration.
So this was like the first real like military move, I guess, right? Like all those other actions, there were obviously guerrilla warriors or whatever, but this is the first like government sanctioned like military action in Kashmir, I think.
And aggression by Pakistan.
Dang, this is some serious firepower. I didn't realize they'd have like artillery either. I feel like that always happens when I talk about countries that aren't America. I always end up saying like, wow, I can't believe they have like this modern technology. But like it is like, I don't know. I never associated India with having like mass weapons of war like this, Like, again, maybe they have like tractors or something, but not like our heavy artillery. And that doesn't fit the character of the country of India that I know.
The subcontinent echoes and shudders to the sounds of a full-scale...
But it is wild, too, that there was, like, near full-scale war between India and Pakistan at a certain time. I feel like most people have no concept of there ever being conflict between Pakistan or India. But to see that there was actual, like, full military engagement with one another over this territory, like, this could have been a lot bigger of a war. And it might still be, eventually, to this day.
Scale undeclared war. Down the mountainsides, across the frontiers, from India into Pakistan, from Pakistan into India, come the fighting men of both nations.
Again, this is just such a like bizarre time and place for this conflict to be taking place. The most like rural part of India, or like the most, I don't know, like exotic part of India maybe. It's so bizarre to see just warfare taking place here. I don't know.
Flames and smoke rising from the bombed-out villages and towns of Kashmir dot the once peaceful countryside.
Yeah, again, this looks like the whole city was bombed or something, though. Like, what were the tactics of this war? That's what I'm curious about. It looks like just artillery shells maybe were just destroying this whole village, but again, what's the point of that? Are they trying to destroy the villages of like the Muslims so that they can like advance the Hindu, or are they just trying to destroy homes? I don't know. It feels like an almost attempt at like cleansing,
Again, refugees clog the dirt roads of the troubled land, fleeing with whatever earth...
Dang, when your house is destroyed, but you still have your your mattress. Not your mattress, what is this? Your bed frame? Yeah, when your house is destroyed, but you still keep your bed frame. This is a nice bed frame, too, the carved wood legs.
Possessions they can carry. The innocent victims of ancient hatreds are a living reminder of the words that Mahatma Gandhi spoke on Independence Day. I see only rivers of blood. With this grave new threat to world peace, the United Nations Security Council is summoned...
Oh, there it is. There's the Pakistan flag.
...into an emergency session in New York. It is the 125th...
Yeah, there's definitely some more interesting flags in here if you really take a closer look.
...meeting on the recurring Kashmir question. Presiding is America's new ambassador.
But what's also crazy is that this didn't result in a full-scale war. Like, this is, I feel like, one of the first conflicts that the UN actually existed for and helped, like, remediate. I feel like before the UN, like, this would have had no choice but to spiral and to escalate into, like, full-scale war. But it is remarkable to think that, like, half the reason I don't know anything about this conflict is just because it wasn't that bad relative to the conflicts of the past, To
the United Nations, Arthur Goldberg, who tells the delegates,
I regret that the first time I meet with you formally must be a time of crisis. India was the first to destroy the atmosphere of moderation which was sought to be established between the two countries.
So this Pakistani guy is arguing that India was the first to destroy the air of peace or cooperation that they had amongst them at the beginning or at the end of colonialism. I wonder if anyone agrees or disagrees with that.
India offered gratuitous provocation to Pakistan as much as to the United Nations when in December 1964 it proceeded to annex Kashmir so as to thwart forever the self-determination of the people of Kashmir.
See, that's fair. If you're going to claim that land, you're kind of denying the people forever the right to self-determination. It's a complex argument.
The present hostilities originated with large-scale infiltrations of armed and unarmed personnel from Pakistan.
I feel like the Indian story is just like more sensical. The Indians were just being infiltrated by like guerrilla Pakistanis who were trying to disrupt things. I don't know. Again, like I'm trying not to get political because I don't know enough to take a side on this. It just I feel like I agree with the Indians more.
And until the activities of such personnel cease, and until all such personnel are withdrawn from the Indian side of the ceasefire line, peace cannot be restored, for which Pakistan must accept full responsibility.
We should in this council act quickly.
The United Kingdom just trying to not be noticed by everyone in the corner. Like, yeah, let's pretend like this issue is Pakistan and India's issue. Like, like they're the only ones causing it. There's no one else at fault here. Let's all point the fingers at India and Pakistan, shall we, UK?
Voice. We should make our call for
Look at the guy behind him just smoking a cigarette inside. Dang.
an end to conflict unanimous and unmistakable. In doing so, we shall be speaking with the true voice of the United Nations.
I now put to the vote the resolution in document S/.
It is wild that this is like the UN deliberation of this case, you know, like now this is history. To see a resolution in this region, you would have to go back to this decision that we're watching take place right now. It's just, again, it's like it's a historical moment at this point.
6662.
And we're just watching it casually, you know?
6662. Those in favor will please raise their hand.
Il n'y a pas d'objection, je mets au voix le projet de résolution S6662. Ceux qui sont pour sont priés de lever la main.
By a unanimous vote of nations large and small, the Council asks for an immediate ceasefire and settlement through negotiations directed by Secretary...
See, is this really how the UN works? Or is it how it worked? Like there's the meeting table or the conference table in the middle, and then everyone sits around you who like votes. These must be people from different countries sitting around the table, and then at the table it's probably India and Pakistan, right? It's a confusing setup. It's like these people around them are voting, but they're not talking, right?
The members of the Council have indicated by unanimously adopting the resolution that we welcome in particular the statement of our distinguished Secretary General in light of this resolution that he intends to proceed promptly to the subcontinent. We hope, we know that his prestige, his impartiality, his fairness, and the dignity of his office.
So who's this guy? This guy that we just watched come in here? Is he like a U.S. diplomat? What kind of diplomat is he? He kind of looks Asian or something, but he could be American.
May help bring this tragedy to a prompt close and point the way towards establishment.
Is this like the Indian government building that they just showed us? This? I don't know. I'm not familiar enough with India's government buildings to know or not, but it looks like it's some important building.
Point the way towards establishment of an enduring peace between these two great countries. We, the members of the Council, indeed the people of the world, ask for no more, we expect no less.
In the search for a settlement in Kashmir, hopefully...
Yeah, so that whole statement was kind of just like, I don't know, stroking an ego kind of. Like, I didn't really understand what they were saying because it was so drawn out, but it clearly looks like they were just trying to wrap things up.
In the search for a settlement in Kashmir, hopefully a new beginning has been made by nations and men of goodwill.
Okay, that was the end. That's interesting. Oh, there's a little ad at the end for the mall. Maybe we'll watch that at the end too. All right, but before we get to that, let's just have some final thoughts. So that was good, but I'm honestly a little let down by it. And I'll tell you why. I feel like I already know more about the Kashmir conflict. Like, this made it seem like India and Pakistan were just made and then they started fighting over this territory. But if you know more of the history, you know that the decision to go to Pakistan or India really fell on the prince or the king of Kashmir at the time. And I think they made the decision to stay with India even though their population was mostly Muslim. I think the prince was Hindu, but their peasants or their servants or whoever were the Muslims. So I think it was a decision that reflected the choice of the leadership and not the people. And ultimately, that's kind of what I wanted to see explained by this, is the actual like logistics and what side everyone was on. Like, I just got the sense that, like, from this, India and Pakistan are arguing over a territory, when in reality, I guess that is what they are doing, but in reality, there were, choices that were made by both sides that led to this conflict. So I feel like we just didn't actually get to the true bottom of it. I don't know if my understanding of it is now, like, with more hindsight, you can say that, whereas in this time, that really didn't make sense as an explanation to give. I don't know if something has changed since then that has made people give different explanations now, but that is my understanding of it, and I just don't feel like this dove really into the causes. It tried to give us like a surface level understanding of the disagreement, but ultimately, that's all it seems like. It just seems like a disagreement. It doesn't seem like the history and culture of this place affected it. Like, that's ultimately the truth, is like the reason Kashmir is in such a predicament is because of the history and culture of that land, of that countryside. So I don't know. I feel like we didn't get to learn the history and culture of Kashmir. We learned more about Gandhi than we learned about Kashmir proper in this video. So kind of disappointed. Still, I feel like I did learn stuff. I feel like I learned a lot about India during this time. I did learn stuff about Gandhi too. So not a whole loss, but I feel like we might need to continue learning about Kashmir in the future. So with that, I'm going to go try to find some more Kashmir stuff, and I'll just cut to black.